Welcome, everyone, back to another episode of Cat's Eye on the Future. This week's show, we're just going to do a review of current events because we haven't been able to do that for a couple of weeks. But starting next week, I'd like to, on these review shows, go back to doing a personal reading. So if you would like to have your personal question considered for use on the show, just send me an email at melodyreader@gmail.com and write show question in the title. And while I can't promise to use all your questions on the show, I can promise to look at them and consider them. Remember, no legal or health questions, but most other things, including your own questions about current events as well as personal issues, are encouraged. Meanwhile, we'll take a look at this week's current events right after these short messages. All the music used on the show today is from musicalley.com, your source for free-to-air music for podcasts. The artist plays their music up for free to air in hopes that you, the listener, will visit their site and purchase some of their outstanding musical offerings. So after the show, why not visit musicalley.com and explore their extensive playlist?
She sings, she goes home in the evening with the dew all on her wings.
Have questions? The cards have answers. If you would like a personal reading with Melody, just go to my website, melodipsychicreadings.com. That's Melody with an I, psychicreadings.com, for information, or email me at melodyreader@gmail.com. Readings are available using Skype, phone, email, or even in person if you are lucky to live in Ireland. Why not find out what special messages the cards have just for you and book a private reading today?
See me from beneath the sea, the best in all of Ireland. See me from beneath the sea, the best in all of Ireland.
Welcome, everyone. We're back with Cat's Eye on the Future, and this is the show where we take a look at the energies that are likely to be affecting you and your future this coming week. We're going to be returning, as I said earlier, to our regular reading format that we fall back on when we don't have interviews, especially since the last 2 weeks have both been interview shows. We replayed an older interview with my husband and roommaster, Kavildafur Gunderson, and then we had a new interview with him, which I think everybody really enjoyed. I know I did. But I'm sure that you enjoyed those, you'd probably like to take a look at what's going on and coming up right now. So if you missed the archives for those previous shows, you can find them listed on my site, melodipsychicreading.com. In the future, I hope to have more interview shows, and I'm sure everyone, again, will be looking forward to that. But I think for the next couple of weeks, we're probably going to continue with the back to the reading format, just so we can catch up on current events and sort of look at what they have to say through the lenses of the cards and the runes. Before getting started on this adventure, the usual disclaimer: all readings done on this show are for entertainment purposes only. But like any form of entertainment, they can be used by you as a source of information, so when you're making your own very personal decisions, you can keep some of this stuff in mind. Now, with that out of the way, let's look at our cards and runes for the coming week, September 16th through 23rd, 2013. Now, this week I asked the question this way: what are the most likely possible energies and or events coming up for the week of September 16th through 23rd, 2013. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Not a lot of room for pitfalls there, hopefully. Well, when we left off reading 2 weeks ago, the world seemed on the verge of war, and the energies of both the concept of father or patriarchal male directive energy combined with a lack of money or a combination of cards with no money, it really seemed to be out in front. Along with both the Fehu rune for wealth and the Sawilo rune, the sun at midday, it could be lightning or strength as well. There were also other kind of negative cards, both never and no, which we already mentioned, with the never card as well, along with the card for what usually stands for mundane jobs of employment. So we had no money, no work, and the father kind of overseeing all of it. Overall, it was a rather grim time period predicted, with a lot of issues among money and power. Both of these forces did really play out, but sometimes in some rather unusual ways. Those of you following my nearly daily blog on my website, I try most days to do a card of the day. I don't always make it, but most of the time we check in, 4 to 5 times a week. And we saw the cards take to the verge of war in the Middle East, only to suddenly pull back. It's starting to have energies like Isa or ice, getting stuck energy, and other things moving in and creating a situation where hostilities seem to be morphing into a very strange new direction, which is exactly what they did a few days later. The surprise halt or hold on the march toward international military action in the Middle East. I'm not going to say military action because that's been ongoing, but this kind of international head standoff was predicted a few days before it actually happened in the cards, with the Sage card suggesting there was a chance for a wiser head to redirect, at least for a time, that energy that was marching us right off to the battlefield. And that seems to be exactly what occurred. Not that I'm saying that everybody who was part of that decision was wise. I think they had their own reasons. I mean, it seemed unlikely, but it's exactly what the little father, aka President Putin, managed to pull off. And I've mentioned before that the little father was one of the titles of the old Russian czars. So I think even in the reading from 2 weeks ago, we had hints of his role already there. And again, I'm not saying he is necessarily a wise sage, but in this case, he was one of the father figures or heads of graybeards who actually seemed to have stepped in, and possibly for his own reasons, modified the situation and changed it directly the way the cards seem to be suggesting the energy was going. He took an energy that was existing, and maybe he was able to work with it, probably unconsciously, but because of the way the energy was, I think it made it easier for this kind of at least temporary diplomacy to pay off. Putin may even be connected to the no money situation in some fashion, as other blog readers continue to indicate that following the money, both in the case of Putin or in the case of just international situation in general, that following the money was really the heart of the entire Middle Eastern intervention dance that had been going on for weeks. I kept getting the various combinations of things that none of them quite as stark as the no money combination of the reading show, but very much a follow the money. And I noticed that some other readers and astrologers also pointed out very similar things. So this seems to have been a really big issue in the world the last few weeks. Now, in the last few days, and I wrote this down on Friday. It's now Sunday morning that I'm recording it. This will go on the air tomorrow night on Monday. But in the last few days, the energies have been more on direct issues like lightning and the flooding and thunderstorms in Colorado that happened on the day of the morning that I got the lightning rune, which is also the sun rune or Sawilo. And that really seemed to play out that time in not so much in the Middle East, but more in North America, and is an actual example of real weather. I mean, it also included money and economic employment concerns, both in North America and Europe. We saw that in the cards as well, and I think the no money combination was still playing there. But really, last week the cards seemed to morph from going from just looking at the Middle East to looking at some more general situations, especially again like the storms and other weather systems. Some of the reasons I think this will be apparent when we get to next week's cards. Now, some of the reasons I think that we may be moving on to some other issues as well as the Middle East will become apparent as I go into this week's cards. But let's look at now going into this week. Let's look at the cards in order to get a sense of what may be coming up in the current situation before us. The first card set the tone for the reading, and in this case, it makes me somewhat uneasy as it is the Beast again. Previous listeners will recognize the Beast as that angry, raging, uncontrolled, jealous, lusting, furious animal nature that every human being has inside themselves to some degree. And in this regard, part of this reading is both international and current events, but part of it's personal, because we all have the Beast inside, and as tiny children, we are allowed to express the Beast freely by throwing tantrums and other, acting out behaviors that little children do. But as adults, most people learn to keep the Beast somewhat on a leash. Now, if you totally ignore him, he will go out and get behind you anyway, and you may wind up inadvertently attacking others or even yourself in self-destructive and unfortunate ways, because he will demand to be recognized. But there are ways to cope with the beast by soothing and by acknowledging, and even by things like vigorous physical exercise and things that are productive and not necessarily destructive. But if you ignore him, he won't just go away. He will always stay there. So this is something to remember with the beast. It's always something kind of present whenever human beings are around. It's basically our inner animal nature. It can help save us when we have to make split decisions in matters of danger, like those people in the floods. Their inner beast may have said, run uphill, and save their lives, or, grab your children and run. That's a very animal response that's positive. But when you have the beast card, the thing to remember is that he's also a creature of pure emotions. No logic or rationalizing is going to stop him when he's in the forefront of things. Thoughts and critical thinking are totally alien to the beast. As the starting card for a weekly current events reading and general energy reading, this suggests next week is going to be a rather dicey time where raging and angry and kind of spontaneous emotions are likely to be running furiously about in all directions, and it's going to make critical, irrational thinking decisions difficult for people. And that includes individuals as well as world leaders. It's going to kind of affect everybody to a degree. So when you find yourself reacting emotionally, this is a week when you're going to want to sit down and try to cool off and then think about things before making major decisions. But we'll get back to that in a little while. However, a major change from over 2 weeks ago is instead of the beastly father combination, which we actually saw like a couple of months ago, we had the beast and the father right together, right before we had all of the problems in Egypt. And I, at that time, thought the beastly father was probably Morsai. But at this point, instead of a beastly father, what we have is a mother card right next to the beast. So essentially we have the beastly mother, or the animal mother, and the mother card right next to the beast itself is also followed by the birth card. This 3-card combination is unsettling, to say the least, because it suggests that a beastly mother, or the beast somehow affects the mother, who could be an actual female leader, perhaps a country with a female identification, again, Mother Russia or Britannia. You need more information, but that kind of thing. Or something with a female name, even a corporation. My husband also suggested this could even be Mother Earth, feeling harmed or, bruised or angry. I'm not sure that it is, but I do want to mention that. Because whatever it is, it's likely to give birth to something or a situation that is born in anger, that may be highly uncontrolled, raging, and very difficult and not impossible to control. Now, we've already seen some of that in the flooding. The flooding in Colorado and New Mexico and Wyoming, that's a perfect example of the beast in nature. And in that case, it's not really that the water has emotions, although we often refer to the angry sea or the angry, raging water. And that's kind of, so you cannot control the flood. You can sometimes divert it, but if it's coming down the canyon, all you can really do is get out of the way. And what exactly this situation, issue, or action that is born is, it's difficult to say at this time. I wish I could be clearer, but I'm not sure. But we get at least one hint in the voyage card. The voyage card comes next, and it could just be a suggestion that the beast and the mother combine to give birth to something that's going to travel quite far or move forward from where it starts out. Again, think of that flood water coming on off the rain falling and coming down off the mountains and running down through the creeks and breaking out through the dams and going into the urban area. It could be something like that. But given the nature of the beast, pun intended, to be strongly something rather ugly, this could describe an illness or another type of contagion pretty well. I'm not saying that's what it is. Again, just like the floodwaters, however, it's something to keep in mind. However, it could also describe a mass movement, a psychological idea, or even a kind of a mob mentality that once it takes over, once it gets sparked, it just keeps on moving. Again, this birth of something that seems beast-driven. The voyage card also contains the image of a map on it with an old-fashioned sailing ship on it. It's a picture from a time when great fleets from Europe colonized and set out to take over many parts of the world. So there are hints of naval vessels, the shipping trade, cargo, and even colonization all in this card, depending on the context. And I kind of feel drawn to all of those aspects, especially that colonization idea. Because when you think about the Middle East, especially, and some of the other places that are having issues in the world recently, they were often made colonies in the 18th and 19th centuries of these European powers. And a lot of these problems that we're seeing now, actually, some of them date from before then, but some of them were exacerbated or contributed to by the very former colonial powers that were looking to possibly get involved again if a war had broken out. I mean, it still could happen, but it did not in the last 2 weeks, thankfully. So, but anyway, now we have the beast and the mother giving birth to a voyage or a situation involving ships. And we have the final card of fortune. Aha, guess what? Money again. The fortune card is usually about great fortunes, money, especially old money, and all sorts of macro, that is large economic situations that are in a current events reading. It can also refer to seeking fortunes, making fortunes, losing fortunes, depending on context, and like all of these cards, it could have spiritual context too. If I see this in a reading with a client, it could be that there's a threat to their actual money and fortunes, but it could also be seeking their spiritual fortune or their mental fortune, their life path. But in this case, I really think it's one more case of what we've seen for weeks now, repeating over and over again, follow the money. The naval aspects of the voyage card also suggest that the war was, or at least the flotilla of so many naval ships in the Middle East may be affected by this mother and beast pairing. It could also stand for a threat to worldwide trade, especially that of cargo ships and commodities. So I'm getting again, but I do have this real feeling that ships are somehow involved, whether that's something that takes place by accident or design from all those ships and naval ships and battleships and things just being in the Middle East and sitting there, or whether it's an actual threat to goods getting around the world, I'm not sure. But many traditional fortunes were based on commodities and shipping, and that still holds true today. So anything that threatens this could be enough to encourage people to react with their emotions rather than their heads. Think of people jumping off buildings when the stock market collapsed in 1929. I don't know that we're going to see that sort of behavior, and it feels more like shipping than the stock market, although I'm not specifically reading the stock market either. But it's that kind of not thinking ahead that, well, maybe, okay, I've lost all this money, but maybe I can do something. You just end your life. It's that kind of not the animal thinking. And when the beast is in charge of a week, this is probably not going to be pretty to watch people's reactions to whatever this issue is. Okay, now we get to go to the runes, and they basically just echo some of the previous energies. Remember, the runes tend to read more archetypal, deep things. It was the lightning rune that preceded before the floods in Colorado. So, these tend to be more like, runes read like kind of epic, older stuff a lot of the time. But here, the first rune is Dagaj, which is the sun at dawn. 2 weeks ago, we had the sun at midday, shining brightly and strongly. We also had that lightning element. Now we have a kind of dimmer, but perhaps more hopeful sun, because it's the sun at dawn. It's the sun that slowly brings light. But there's also a lot of mist and fog that tend to come with, that time between dawn and night and dusk. And that early morning dawn sort of feeling also sometimes is kind of an expectation that things are waiting to happen. Like the sun rune itself, Dagaj also, unfortunately, has aspects of all things nuclear. That's in terms of like the little sun or basically atomic reactions. This has to be considered whenever any of the sun runes show up in current events readings, especially one where the beast is in charge. Hopefully this is not going to be the case this week, but And Dagush would be exact sort of, all things nuclear, and that includes ships, submarines, power, medicine. I mean, it can have good aspects as well, but it should be paid careful attention to, as well as paying attention to the fortunes of the nuclear industry itself. And one other point on this is that Japan, which has this sort of ongoing nuclear catastrophe that just keeps rolling along and rolling along and rolling along, and it keeps showing up in the cards and the runes, it is actually the land of the rising sun. That's sort of their title that they bring into their energy, I think. And so Dagush being the rune of the rising sun, again, I'm getting this feeling that anything nuclear should be watched for this week, including Japan, as well as probably other situations as well. Now, our last rune is once again right at the heart of the matter. Just like 2 weeks ago, we had Fehu, which means cattle or wealth. As I mentioned the last time, this is a largely positive rune, and appearing once again now with all of the other money aspects, we have to realize that Fehu is like associated with the really ancient concepts of being wealthy. It's like having a lot of cows. It involves fertility, both in humans and in animals. You want to have, in traditional society, you want to make lots of people. You want to have lots of, your sheep should have lots of lambs. You want to have lots of calves. And the other aspect, of course, of early money is gold. And Fehu is often seen as a golden rune. Even in this traditional literature, Fehu can morph into battles and fights about all three of these aspects of wealth, particularly when the beast is in charge. When the rational mind is in charge, or when, some other runes or energies are in charge, Fehu can be just absolutely wonderful. Or it can have humorous aspects, where once I was involved in a group where we concentrated on Fehu, and one of the people in the group had some orange cats, and they got together and made more orange cats. So you had fertility, you had golden color, you had kittens, which wasn't exactly what the person had in mind. But it did, in fact, it was sort of a humorous outcome. But again, as I said the last time when this came up 2 weeks ago, my husband, the Dr. PhD in Old Norse Studies, has said that the entire Rheingold cycle that was made famous by Wagner and was actually based on the Norse sagas can be thought of as an 8-hour explanation of the Fehu rune. What you have is battles over money and sex, some of the nastiest types of fights known to mankind. Until popular after thousands and thousands of years, I'm sure that people were fighting over basically personal goods. I mean, what constitutes wealth may change, but the idea of having it does not. It doesn't really matter if it's your personal bow and arrow or whether it's your personal corporation. It's just that the understanding of, just like the understanding of birth and fertility can change over generations, but the desire for both tends to remain of the human psychic. All of these things are very, very primordial. They sort of come with people. They probably, to some degree, predate people in a sense that this idea of personal property and sexuality to make new things and new people and creativity goes way, way back. And people have been willing to travel great distances. There you get that trade, thing again, in hopes of obtaining both marriage partners and wealth by trading. And I mean, we can date this to the early Stone Age. I mean, as soon as you see people, you see things like obsidian going around, and it's very likely that people were trading wives and looking for husbands and whatnot, because there's just this kind of natural human drive to do these things. And there are anthropologists even out there that think that both the drive for trade and the drive for mating together are part of what makes us human. I'm not sure I'd go that far, but they're very, very, very deep things and very difficult. They're just not things when the beast is in charge. It's just a week when these natural desires to mate, reproduce, and obtain worldly possessions are likely to be emotionally directed and not necessarily in a positive way. In fact, I think you're going to see, you can be positive, again, because an individual can take that beast and say, aha, I'm going to go home tonight and I'm going to have fun with my wife and we're going to pretend that I am the raging beast and she wants me. That's great. If as long as both people are on board and they're playing the game, that is an easy and healthy way to express that, especially, say, if you actually want to make a baby. the energy would be really good for that. However, in most ways, most people are going to be totally unconscious that they're being affected by this. They're going to be totally unaware, and that includes world leaders. And this is a highly charged power of Fehu and the morning sun together, let loose in the golden burning fire, that's unlikely to stop the stampeding beast until the beast is either redirected or loses momentum on its own. Beasts can be run off a cliff. Think of ancient cattle again, which we've talked about before. Early man could run them off a cliff, or they could accidentally run themselves off a cliff. But the only certain thing that but nothing appeals to logic with them. Logic and common sense are not going to stop a raging beast. A cliff will, or you could derail it. You could maybe have a big rock or something that have to go around, and you could possibly even roll a rock down there. But like the last fast-moving train wreck we saw 2 weeks ago, it was redirected and diverted, at least for a time. And this beast could be again. I mean, I'm not even sure this about exactly the same issues. But again, we've seen 2 weeks ago, we saw the beast diverted. But this week looks to be another pivot point, and it's the opposing energy of the sages and the wise heads we saw last week in my blog. So we have this last week was a week where calm and thought and common sense were likely to prevail. This is a week that is very likely to go just directly the opposite way. The other thing really interesting about this coming week is the likely role that women or female identified countries or even feminine energy, Mother Earth herself, may play. With the beast next to the mother, you do have to wonder if some of the raging emotions will be those more associated with women, especially mothers more than fathers. And not that men don't have these emotions, but the cards tend to work on archetypes rather than actual reality. So just like we had hints of the attacks against children in Syria in the cards before, we now see another real or potential threat to mothers and or children, or both, perhaps, or birthing mothers, because we have the birth card there too. That may be used to further the voyage, or perhaps move the ships or navies once again. For all I know, it might even be a revamping of the original situation, meaning the gassing of the children in Syria, presented in a new way. So my suspicion is it will be a new situation, some sort of new attack or threat or action that's one designed to produce a lot of angry responses when or if it occurs. So be kind of looking for that, hoping it doesn't happen, but the idea of it's for the children or the mothers are under threat, we must save them, seems to be rather strong in the air. I'd love to say something really positive about next week's energies, but the best I can do is just to stress again that the Voyage and Fortune cards can also represent fortunes moving forward, and those include the fortunes and fates of individuals as well as the world. Doggoose is potentially a very good rune, suggesting that new day, a new situation, new awareness. And Fehu, of course, has many positive aspects in terms of both spiritual and physical wealth, creation and birthing. So it's possible that the later cards, instead of being dominated by the beast card, maybe we overcome the beast, or as I discussed earlier, redirect the beast into more, particularly the personal life, so you can have a bit more fun with it, or at least go with the flow, but not go over the cliff. The mother card may give birth to a new voyage that improves the fortunes as well. So something new could come into being, or particularly in your personal life, that brings forth the world to a new dawn. I mean, there could be like a new technology that involves something nuclear or something related to the sun, solar power, that it also comes into being this week. Not everything is going to be negative. It's just that with the beast in charge, you have emotions over rationality. Certainly, as individuals, we can concentrate on the energies working out this way in our lives. We just need to be careful to remember that the beast is very strong this week, and to soothe rather than to try to reason with him. You cannot reason with the beast. Music, laughter, love, good company can all go a long way towards disarming the beast and sending him back to his room for a nap, but talking to him or trying to be rational is not going to work, which is, after all, the best thing to do in the aftermath of a tiny child's tantrum. Something you just have to ignore while they're having it, watching them, making sure they stay safe and don't actually hurt themselves. But then when they finally cry themselves out and quit screaming, you can carry them off to bed afterwards and let them take a nap, which is really the best you can hope for when the beast is in charge. So as much as possible this week, individuals may want to keep an eye on things, ignoring that which they have no control over. At the same time, they keep an eye on it. And this is kind of tricky because you're paying attention, but you're not really buying into it. And this is going to be important in personal interactions too. You need to concentrate on your own personal voyage and fortunes as best as you can. And just try to not totally buy into other people's drama. It's going to be there. It's going to try to suck you in. Sometimes you won't be able to avoid it. But just try to keep calm. And again, remember, people are not responding logically. People are responding emotionally. So the only thing you can do is try to calm them down. This is not a time to try to analyze them in that way, or try to present actual solutions, because they're probably not listening. This is really a week for everybody acting out to a degree. But this probably is a good week for new projects, and even new journeys, vacations, provided you keep a watch out for the dangers that should be apparent rather quickly. That's one good thing about the beast, is he's seldom quiet or subtle. He may sneak up on you, but once he's there, you know it. And you can take steps to divert him, or just try to get out of the way. And again, getting out of the way when possible, when people are having their drama, is a really good idea. If you cannot divert them by saying, hey buddy, let's go get a beer and talk about it, and you just let them talk. Or, you can try to get out of the way. If your boss is the one emoting, this may be difficult. But maybe you can suddenly remember an assignment and say, oh, I need to go do such and such for you, and run, because it's just not appealing to reason, is not going to work. Also, remember during weeks like this that all energies can change. They're temporary. So while the beast may get a few days in the limelight right now, he's soon going to be replaced as a major energy by another and hopefully calmer one really soon. So take care. Be watchful and as centered as you can. Have your red cape ready to distract that bull if it starts raging at you. And your ship ready to sail onward if you need to. In other words, leave the situation. Next time, we're going to take a look at just how this actually does play out, because I'm really curious myself. Hopefully we can identify who, what, or exactly how the beast was, and maybe who the mother card was and is, and things may be clear at that point. But until then, you can follow along with my daily blog readings at my Card of the Day section on my website, melodipsychicreadings.com. That's Melody with an I. I'll try to update most days. And at the blog, we take a shorter but kind of more real-time look at the energies in the coming 24 to 48 hours. So it's a little more, if things change suddenly, and occasionally they do during the week, it's much easier to follow it. So I hope you'll visit my blog. I hope you've enjoyed this update. Hopefully we'll return next week with both a current events reading and a private reading. If, again, you please send me some questions, I'll be happy to look at them and look at them on the air. But I think that's about all for this week. So take care, bright blessings, and see you soon.
Well, here's a health to the company and one to my lass.
You have been listening to Cat's Eye on the Future, the show where we take a glimpse of the energies coming soon into your world and into your future. Be sure to join us again next time when we explore another chapter of Cat's Eye on the Future.
Again. Well, here's a health to the company and one to my last. Let's drink